How's it going, everybody? Welcome into the Skyline Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jack Hartman, joined, as always, by my good friend, my co-host on the West Coast, Nick Normand. Nick, how you doing tonight, man?
Doing well, doing well. Woke up nice and early, got back from a trip last night, and just getting back into the flow of things, man. Feels like, when you go on a trip and you get back and you really wish you had taken that extra day off of work to just be like, man, I just need a day to recover and get over it. And so I'm very blessed that I'm working from home today. I'm working from home tomorrow anyway. That's my work schedule for me. And so it just spaced out perfectly where I'm not having to run around an office today. And thank God that I'm not, because I will be pretty ineffective right now and not having a fun time. But happy to be with you, Jack. Super stoked to be here talking about football, talking about draft potential needs for these teams, AFC teams today. But had a fun trip. Happy to be back. Happy to be talking with you. How are you doing, man?
Yeah, doing well. It's kind of a dreary day here in Central Texas, kind of getting that first spring rain today. So nothing too crazy, but definitely feels a little dreary, a little droopy. But yeah, no, good to be talking with you again here today. And so what we're going to be doing, and we're doing the AFC this week, and then we're doing the NFC next week, is there's still one, two, maybe three, kind of not even dominoes that need to fall, just decisions that need to get made in free agency. At this point, the decisions that get made aren't really affecting other players that are free agents on the market right now. But as of right now, Aaron Rodgers has not signed anywhere. It's sort of looking like it's Steelers or retirement at this point. But there's still he's the best example of some things that aren't completely ironed out yet, but a lot of stuff has been figured out. And as we are preparing here, we're basically almost exactly a month away from the first round of the NFL draft. We're just going to kind of go this week. We're doing the AFC, next week the NFC, sort of post free agency draft needs. So these are things that we're sort of looking at these teams, at these rosters, like, hey, these things need to get addressed in the draft. And we're just saying, these are the top three things that need addressed in the draft. Doesn't necessarily mean that needs to be like, okay, well, a first round pick, if a team doesn't use their first round pick on this, hey, if the best guy available, sitting there is, Abdul Carter, right? Then okay, maybe we don't have edge as the Patriots' top priority, but if Abdul Carter is sitting there, obviously you take him, So that's sort of the mindset that we're going into this with. We're going to do the whole AFC this week. We'll do the NFC next week, and just really get to break down and look at these rosters deeper now that as free agency has happened, teams are signing, because it's really easy when you're getting all of Schefter's tweets like, oh, so and so is signing with this team, to be like, wow, yeah, I feel like I remember the Patriots signed a few guys, like, okay, who is it actually, right? Let's look at it, see who they actually have, and sort of what that does. So with that said, I'm going to present my screen here because Pro Football Focus has a great little tool here that we can just go team by team and look at the things that the moves that they've made. And so we're going to start in the AFC East, and we're going to start with the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills won the AFC East last year. Here are the moves that they made. They signed Joey Bosa to a 1-year deal. They signed Josh Palmer to a 3-year deal. They signed Larry Ogunjobi, defensive interior, to a 1-year deal. Edge, Michael, is that Holt? Do you think is that up? Hoyt. Okay. Michael Hoyt to a 3-year deal. Darrington Evans, running back. Derek Forrest, safety. Kendrick Green, guard. Laviska Shenault, wide receiver. Ty Johnson, running back. They re-signed Reggie Gilliam. They re-signed long snapper Reed Ferguson, re-signed safety DeMar Hamlin, extended Josh Allen, re-signed Dane Jackson. They also extended Greg Rousseau, Khalil Shakir, and Terrell Bernard. They traded Kyer Elam, and they released Von Miller. So having looked at that, thinking about this team, thinking about some of the weaknesses of this team, Nick, what are, just to start, what are some things, just some thoughts? We won't necessarily put our three down yet. We'll chat a little bit more, but what are some of your initial thoughts about this Buffalo Bills team and some needs that they might have?
So I lean a little bit, even though the defense has been very steady over the last couple of years, it does feel to me like the defense, they've been looking to get some difference makers in some very specific ways, where it feels like Von Miller was meant to be that edge pressure, over the top kind of guy, where he was meant to be that, okay, late in the fourth quarter, you need a sack, who's going to be your guy to get a sack kind of dude.
Yeah.
And with them cutting him, he never really became that due to injury and age and a whole mess of things since he went to the Bills. And so it seems like Joey Bosa kind of is meant to replace that. But Joey Bosa also, I believe, is over 30. He's 30 plus. He is 29, going to be 30 in July. And he's been really injury prone, inconsistent in a lot of ways. And so I view that as kind of a spot where I could see them drafting somebody, just because that's been something that they've been trying to get over and over and over again. And I don't know that Bosa fills that. The other thing that really stuck into my memory was during, I believe, the playoff game, they had one or both of their corners go out at different spots. And when, I forget which corner it was that went out first, but I believe Elam went in and they just picked on him and picked on him and picked on him. They were throwing at him 2, 3, 4 plays in a row, just throwing at him every single time. And although I do think that you get rid of Elam and you didn't really need Elam in the first place, it does make it feel like their corner room, which does run a bunch of nickel packages, that they'd want to get more depth at that position, that's clearly a need as far as their system and their scheme. And the other position that I would lean would probably be receiver, just depth-wise, with Amari Cooper leaving. Khalil Shakir has been pretty darn solid, pretty good. Keon Coleman had a good rookie year, but really didn't overachieve, I would say. And Josh Palmer is just fine. It feels like they don't have somebody that you're forced to double cover, and it feels like that's kind of what they've been looking for the last couple of years since Diggs has kind of tailed off and since he's left. So I would also lean there with the receiver as far as if there would be a way to get a dude who you would need a double cover. Where could Keon Coleman become that? Maybe. Did he show that he is that as a rookie? No. And so that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Yeah, I like all of those. I think, the Joey Bosa signing doesn't really move the needle for me. I think, okay, you got younger Von Miller is kind of what it feels like. I mean, I can't think of a single season that Joey Bosa was played like all 16 or 17 games. He's great. He's a guy that you want to have on your team, but he's not going to be that guy that is that TJ Watt, Myles Garrett, I'm taking over this game, and in the end type guy. I think it's interesting that they extended Greg Rousseau. So I think I could definitely see this team drafting an edge, because you only signed Bosa for 1 year, and maybe drafting a rookie, maybe not your first round pick, but maybe a day 2 edge, and just kind of getting to let him kind of get some spots here and there and kind of test him out. And if you like him a lot, Bosa's done after this year, and you've gotten significantly cheaper and significantly younger at that position just immediately. So I really like edge. I agree with you with wide receiver. They also, you mentioned Amari Cooper. Mac Hollins also signed with the Patriots. So right now, their wide receivers are Josh Palmer, Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman, and Laviska Shenault, which I agree with you. None of those names, all are good wide receivers, and I think can be used well in the Bills offense. But yeah, nobody that scares you, right? And so definitely think that wide receiver, like a big wide receiver. I think your guy Savion Williams out of TCU would be like a great guy for Buffalo to draft, maybe round 2 or round 3. And yeah, corner. I think corner was absolutely the way that they need to go. I think if I were to sort of like rank those three, I think I'd go corner, edge, receiver, because I feel like they definitely need more corners. Edge is like, yeah, you should have another edge, and wide receiver, it's like they have wide receivers, like they do have a wide receiver room. There are other teams that actually just need guys on the depth chart at wide receiver, so yeah, so I think you good with those three as their needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm there with you.
Yeah, so corner, wide receiver, edge for the Buffalo Bills. All right, now let's go. Let's see. Well, let me just hit back. No, it's not going to let me. All right, scroll up. Let's go to the New England or the Miami Dolphins. Miami Dolphins. All right. So Miami Dolphins. I feel like they didn't really do much that was like a splash thing. They did a
Uh,
few they did a few things, like obviously they signed Zach Wilson to a 1 year $6 million deal to be the backup there. Obviously, because I'm a Lions fan and a Syracuse fan, I know Ifatu Melifonwu, so they signed him at safety. But I feel like really when we look at the Dolphins, it was they lost guys and then they brought other guys in that are like, okay, now you have someone playing that position, but you don't, have someone that's of the caliber of the guy you lost. I think the best example of that is safety. They lost Javon Holland. They bring in Ifatu Melifonwu. I think Melifonwu is a good safety. I think he's a rotational safety. He's not a Javon Holland. He's not your number one safety, right? And so I think that was kind of the story of the Dolphins free agency. Again, there's still some more or less questions out there. Like, okay, well, what's Tyreek Hill is a very volatile player. Is he going to demand a trade and sit out? There was talk of that and some other stuff. Obviously, you have Tua at quarterback there who is getting paid as if he's a top 10 quarterback in the NFL. I'm not sure that he is, but also he's also, we've seen kind of one hit away from serious questions. So yeah, so I think this is a Dolphins team that's just in a really, really weird spot that they're like, we had our competitive window and it was basically 2 years open. The Bills won the division both of those years, and now we're kind of stuck. Is sort of where they're at. I kind of equate what the Dolphins are at to what the Cardinals were at the first couple years after Kyler Murray signed his big extension. After his rookie deal. So Nick, when you look at this Dolphins team, what are your thoughts? How do you sort of sift through this?
mm-hmm. So when I break it down in my mind, I'm still super concerned about the way they've been retooling the offensive line. I think Teron Armstead's on borrowed time. He's been a really good left tackle for a number of years, but he's quite old at this point. I think he's 32, 33. He's 33, going to be 34 this season in July. And so being a 34-year-old tackle, you're on borrowed time. Like there just aren't that many offensive tackles who are that good for that long. But I also think Eichenberg at guard, he's been up and down for his whole career. James Daniels, they got from the Steelers. He tore his Achilles early in the season, and he's been up and down throughout his career. He's had a better stretch with the Steelers and was looking good. But a torn Achilles is a massive injury. And Austin Jackson at right tackle, it feels like, has been very up and down, very questionable as well on the offensive line. I feel like they could go at a number of spots on the offensive line, just take the best offensive lineman available. I don't know that they will, because this particular kind of offense that they run with Mike McDaniels feels very 49ers-esque with more speed-oriented and less power-oriented type of plays. And so it feels like they don't like to invest on the offensive line outside of like left tackle with Armstead, very similar to Trent Williams on the 49ers. So I don't know if they will do it, but I think they should do it. I think there are a lot of holes on this defense that I'd be kind of concerned about. I think that their defensive tackle situation, Zach Sealer has really overachieved expectations, and that's been really good. But then the only other guys that you have there are Benito Jones, Matt Dickerson, Neil Farrell. Like, those are just replacement level dudes. So if Sealer gets injured, your defensive tackle room is really, really barren, I would say. And I'd be really concerned about that. If Sealer sits, I don't know what you do on a pass rush down from the interior. I think the edge room has been up and down and very injured, but I don't think I would draft there because I think it's very talented, although injured. I would really kind of be concerned about cornerback, though, where currently Jalen Ramsey is going to be 31 years old this season in October. And although he's been a great corner, then been a good corner in the league, I'd just be really concerned about his injury history recently, inconsistently with play, and just kind of going downhill a little bit. Not a fall off of a cliff, but if he's out, if he deteriorates, you're depending on Cater Kohu, who's a good nickel back. But then you've got Storm Duck and Cam Smith, who has been not great throughout his singular year of play. And so I'd just be pretty worried about that corner situation. I feel like safety is just a position that can kind of be replaceable and you're okay. But I think that they could invest there as well a decent bit. So I think there are a number of defensive spots, and offensive line generally would be what I would lean.
Yeah, I agree. I'm thinking offensive line for sure. I agree with everything you said about their offense and the way the 49ers offense kind of looks. But the difference is, like, Brock Purdy has not had a history of, if he gets hit, it could be like end of the season type hit, like we've seen from Tua, unfortunately. And so I think it might be worth, like, hey, like, I get that this isn't necessarily the style of offense that you have, and this doesn't necessarily, or allocating resources to the offensive line is not necessarily something that pairs well with the style of offense that you run. But look at all of the money that you're invested in your quarterback now, and you need to be mindful of that. I agree with corner. I think that there's a chance the Dolphins are right in the perfect spot to draft Will Johnson, depending on what he does. And I agree with you that safety feels replaceable. But also with this draft, I mean, who knows? Like, they might take Nick Eamon-Worry at pick 13 where they're at. So I think it'll just be interesting to see. But I definitely think offensive line, corner, and safety are probably my top three needs for this team. Let's move on to the. Oh, I should just scroll down because it's going to be right there next. The New England Patriots, who had a very aggressive free agency. So they signed. They spend a lot of money. They had a lot of money to spend, and they spend a lot of money. So they get Milton Williams, Stephon Diggs, Carlton Davis, Harold Landry, Robert Spillane are really like the big ones. But again, we mentioned they brought in Mac Hollins. And re-signed Austin Hooper. So Nick, when you look at this young Patriots team with Drake May at quarterback, what are your top initial things that they got to take care of?
When I look at this Patriots team, Jack, I just see a really easy read. I think they've invested in a lot of areas on the team, signed a bunch of free agents, clearly. I still think that where they've invested a bunch, they could invest even more. I think their offensive line, the additions of Morgan Moses and Garrett Bradbury. Moses, a 3-year deal at his age is kind of crazy to me a little bit, where he's been able to be a good stopgap in his career, especially at right tackle, where it feels like he elevates right tackle from being a disaster anywhere he goes to being serviceable. And that's really all you can ask for, but still a 3-year deal at his age. Bradbury's been very good throughout his career, so I think a 2-year deal for him is a good investment. I still think you can invest so much in the offensive line, though, at offensive tackle generally. I think you could draft an offensive tackle, and it really doesn't matter if they were a college right or left tackle. Or if they were a right tackle, it's like, okay, then move them over to left tackle for a bit, and then when Moses retires or move on, slide him over. Or if they're a left tackle, just plug him in. But at guard, I think you need a left guard as well. I think you fit somebody right in there immediately. I think offensive line's a massive need for them still, even with this investing that they've done in free agency. I think that receiver is obviously a massive, massive, massive need. Matt Collins is a good player. He's the kind of gritty, grimy kind of receiver that every team wants on their depth chart. He's the kind of dude who will block, he'll make the tough catches, he'll do all the role player receiver things that you like. And I really like him as a player, but he cannot be a wide receiver 1. He cannot be a wide receiver 2. He maybe sort of kind of can be a wide receiver 3, I guess. But my biggest issue with him with this Patriots team is that he's the exact wrong type of receiver they need, where they need an explosive route runner, like just down the field sort of dude. And he's not that at all. He's the more big body, contested catch, that kind of dude. And so I feel like the explosiveness factor with this Patriots team, they still need massively, where they signed Stephon Diggs, which obviously is an addition, but a massive deal, a massive overpay, even though the guarantees are just over 1 year's worth of guarantees. I'd still be super concerned about Stephon Diggs, what he's able to give to you, especially coming off an ACL tear. It feels like receiver is the massive need, and multiple offensive line spots are my other need for them, where I'd break down offensive line into guard and tackle and say both of those and receiver. Those will be my 3 for this team.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. I think the worst thing that could have happened for the Patriots is Russell Wilson signing with the Giants, because that signing leads me to lean that they're not going to draft Shedeur Sanders at pick number 3, which makes it seem like, I just feel like if that's the case, there is just no chance that Travis Hunter is then available at pick 4 for the Patriots. Like I don't see a world where only one quarterback is taken in the top 3 picks, and the other 2, not like one of them isn't Travis Hunter, who would definitely fill that need at wide receiver. So I'm totally with you with wide receiver, and I agree with you with offensive line, guard, tackle. I think I think whatever you can get is what you want. I'm curious to see if the Patriots with the if let's say, at pick 3, the Giants take Travis Hunter, or Travis Hunter and Abdul Carter are not available after the first 3 picks. I'd be curious to see if the Patriots consider trading back, because, it seems like, drafting Will Campbell at pick 4 would be an overdraft. It's like, okay, well, if the Bears want to get in front of the Raiders to swipe Ashton Genty, Will Campbell at pick 10, not as bad, especially with the other capital that you would be getting there. So I agree with you. Offensive line, specifically like tackle and guard, and wide receiver is definitely the biggest need for this team. Let's move to the New York Jets. The Jets had quite an offseason as well. They signed Justin Fields to a deal that I think is really, really good for him and really, really good for the Jets. They signed him to a 2-year deal. They signed safety Andre Sisco, another former Syracuse defensive back, to a 1-year deal. Outside of those, though, it's like, and I only mentioned Sisco because I'm a Syracuse fan. Like, really, it's like they signed Justin Fields, and then they released Devontae Adams, they released Aaron Rodgers, and they also lost DJ Reed in free agency to the Detroit Lions. Nick, how are you feeling about this Jets team? I feel like I'm looking at it and I'm like, I feel like for the first time in a while, I actually see direction of how this team is moving forward. I feel like I haven't seen that from them in a long time. And like, even including, 2 years ago at first, when they first traded for Aaron Rodgers, like I still felt like, okay, this is putting a Band-Aid on a wound that needs stitches, right? So like how do you see the Jets?
I see it kind of as they're really in their pure transition stage, where I feel like this could be the Lions of a couple years ago of, we're just taking this down and the next year will be better where you might get to that 6. Like this year, I think the team's more talented than 4 wins, but I think it could just be like a 4 or 5 wins reset year. And then that next year, that 7, 8 wins step up. And then you get into the next year, like 9, 10 wins and like contend for a wild card. But I think it's a very hard couple year plan they're kind of trying to build, where it's not that they're tanking or they're intentionally trying to be bad, but they're trying to grow and trying to go the right direction. And so it feels like this could be the first year in that kind of season for them. And so with that, I think they can invest in some long-term spots. I think that offensive line looks to be in a pretty good spot overall as far as starters. I think Olu Fashanu was a great pick last year for them, who hopefully his health and like play time will stay up on the higher end. I think that John Simpson has shown to be starter capable. I think you could definitely draft a guard if you wanted to just solidify that offensive line. I think Chukwuekwara for right tackle, though. I think he can start for you for a season, but I don't think you want him to start for multiple seasons, and I think you definitely can go right tackle. So I think that the Jets could definitely invest in that right tackle position. I think that that would be really easy to be like, hey, we draft right tackle. We're trying to take the Lions kind of path of 2 good offensive tackles, a bunch of good guard center combination in the middle, and just say big offensive line, run the ball down your throat. They have Braylon Allen and Breece Hall. I feel like that run combination combined with Fields makes a lot of sense. I think that that's kind of the scheme they're kind of looking at as far as going forward. So I could see them investing in offensive line as far as that direction. I think that if we're looking at the defense, I think that there are a variety of spots that maybe I think there are some easy spots actually to look at. I think that the loss of CJ Mosley, although he was older and he had injuries but had been healthy the last couple of years, I think to have a running mate with Quincy Williams, who has had some really, really good years in his career, some really good flashes, especially 2 years ago. I think that a running mate for him at the linebacker position would be a great addition if you could get it day 2, maybe. I think that safety is actually a massive need, though. Your guy, Andre Cisco out of Syracuse, he can play. He can be a solid player. But Tony Adams at the strong safety position is definitely somebody who you would want to replace sooner rather than later, I would think, where he has had some good playing experience overall in his career. But he's not somebody I think that you want to be your starting safety. That I don't think this Jets team has a whole bunch of holes where I think that that could be, if you take if in the second round you could get Emanwari or Starks out of Georgia if they fell, because safeties can tend to fall because of positional value. If you could get one of those dudes top of the second round, I think that would be really, really good for them, for a team that the Jets always seem to have good safeties except for right now. And so that's kind of where I'm looking at with them. They have some really talented dudes. There's a reason Aaron Rodgers said, this team's really good. I want to take them to the Super Bowl. And so I think there are a lot of spots like that. I think that wide receiver 2 behind Garrett Wilson, I think Alan Lazard, you don't really want to have there long term. And I just don't feel like their scheme necessitates having a whole bunch of receivers who are stud pass catcher type receivers. So that's kind of where I feel with them.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think right tackle, yes. Linebacker was one of my first thoughts, just in terms of need. Again, need doesn't mean that in the first round they're taking, a linebacker at pick 7 or wherever they're drafting, right? That's not necessarily what that means. It just means that it's something that they need to get, in April when they're in Green Bay for the draft. So I definitely think linebacker, and I think safety. I think a lot of people are really liking penning in Tyler Warren to the Jets at pick 7. I don't hate that pick for them. I think Warren seems like the type of blue collar guy that, when you compared it to the Lions from a few years ago, I think he could be that blue collar guy like Aiden Hutchinson was in that first. In those first couple of years that Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell were there, and they were the ones in charge. So I like the idea of them taking him. And because of their needs, like really, if we look at it, what their needs are or what we see their needs are, pick 7 is kind of early to take any of these guys. And so I don't hate them doing Tyler Warren or someone else who's, best available at pick 7, with then the idea of filling some of those needs later. So with the Jets, we'll go right tackle, linebacker, and safety. And so that
I just want to double back with linebacker. I didn't realize the investment they made on Sherwood. If you look at the middle of the screen, 3 years, $45 million is a big investment. So I bet probably they view that as a lower need if they're investing that highly in Sherwood. So I would probably – I didn't realize they invested that much in him. But when you make that high of an investment, I feel like they want to play dudes with – every team wants to play dudes that they pay. And so I feel like the pay will reflect him getting a bunch of play. So maybe linebacker not as much, but –
yeah, maybe that's a day three pick if there's a linebacker that they like. So that's the end of the AFC East. So just going through them real quick. Buffalo, we had corner, wide receiver, and edge. Yeah. We had corner, wide receiver, and edge as our top 3 needs for Buffalo. For Miami, offensive line, corner, and safety. For New England, offensive line and wide receiver. So really anywhere on the offensive line for both Miami and New England. Though with Miami, like we said, we like Armstead, but he's kind of on borrowed time. And then for the Jets, right tackle, linebacker, and safety is where we're at. So with that being said, let's move on to the AFC North. So the AFC North, we will start going in alphabetical order within or as close to it, if I actually knew my alphabet off the top of my head better, as close to it as we can. Starting with the Baltimore Ravens here for the AFC North. So Baltimore, they signed DeAndre Hopkins. I feel like this means that this is the last year of DeAndre Hopkins' career. I feel like it's just kind of typical. Steve Smith Sr. is sort of the outlier when it came to guys that were older and deeper into their career at wide receiver, signing with the Ravens and having success. The Ravens had Odell Beckham Jr. They had Des Bryant. They've kind of done this. So they have him. Again, doesn't really move the needle for me much. We saw some flashes with Kansas City, but also we saw this is not the DeAndre Hopkins of, certainly not Houston and not even the Cardinals. He's not the same guy. They signed Cooper Rush to a 2-year deal. So when Dak Prescott inevitably gets hurt, someone else will have to be his backup quarterback. They signed linebacker Jake Hummel, corner Chidobe Awuzie. They re-signed Ronnie Stanley to a 3-year deal, solidifying him on the offensive line. They re-signed wide receiver Tylan Wallace, fullback Patrick Ricard, guard Ben Cleveland. They released safety Marcus Williams and corner Arthur Maulet. Nick, when you look at this team, I feel like the Ravens are always a team that I look at them and I look at their roster and then I look at the way they perform in the season and I'm like, I feel like this is a team that always overperforms, at least the way I look at it, but then doesn't really overperform because then we get into the playoffs and they tend to have cataclysmic disasters there. So as you look at this Ravens squad that probably right now is the in Vegas is the odds-on favorite to win this division. What do you see the needs are for them to get over the hump and not just win the AFC North, but be competitive with Buffalo and Kansas City?
I feel like the great thing for the Ravens, I'm a Steelers fan, obviously, so I hate that the Ravens are as good as they are. Good for them. They're a really good team, and they always are a really good team with Lamar because Lamar is amazing. I feel like when you look at this team, the team tends to have a lot of holes, but they tend to be small holes where it's not like position groups where it's like, man, this position group's horrendous and you need to get a starter on day one at this position. Oh, you need a bunch of these kind of dudes at this position, where it never feels like they have emergencies anywhere. And because they never have emergencies, it feels like they can then tend to draft best player available. And I feel like that's still where they're at. When I look at this roster, it feels like both guard spots are places that you could upgrade from, but neither one of them are emergencies. Where Falele at right guard, he's the huge, like 6'8", 400-pound man. He started last year and he really grew into his own throughout the year. Is he the long-term answer? He could be. But Voorhees at left guard, he definitely had his ups and downs, and he had his injury pre-draft that caused him to fall to the 7th. So I could see them drafting guard. I don't think they will. I think there are a decent number of spots on the defense that I could see them going towards. I think that edge rusher is definitely a larger need, although they've invested there. I think that Kyle Van Noy, he's definitely way up there in age. He just had his birthday yesterday, turned 34 years old at edge. Feels like the Ravens have old edge rushers every year, and they're just squeezing every last drop out of all of these edge rushers. Feels like the Justin Houstons and what's the other name of the dude? There were a couple of Jaguars edge rushers that they just were run until the wheels fell off. Bunch of older dudes at the edge rush position. Kyle Van Noy, though, older. David Ojabo, injury prone, hasn't lived up to the billing as a second-round pick. Should have been first-round pick pre-injury. Odafe Owe, he's showing up on my edge rush depth chart for them as second behind Tavius Robinson, who I don't even really know the name particularly well. But if those are your starting edge rush positions in Kyle Van Noy and Tavius Robinson, I think you definitely could see them investing in edge in this draft. And so I think edge is there. I think a running mate for Roquan Smith. They've been trying to have Trenton Simpson fit in there, but it feels like they could put just another linebacker in there where they have Jake Hummel. But it feels like since they lost Patrick Queen, they haven't had the high-end linebacker to pair with him. And Roquan Smith didn't have his best year the last year or two, and that could be something to kind of keep an eye on. Not saying he's going downhill, but he's definitely a dude who's been really, really good, and you want him to stay playing really, really good so that your linebacker core plays up to the billing. I think that maybe they could go corner at some point. Drafting Nate Wiggins last year, he played pretty darn well for stretches of the year. Doesn't feel like it's a hyper large need. They have a bunch of older and a bunch of corners on their roster, it feels like often. Marlon Humphrey's getting up there in age too. I feel like total, I'd lean edge rusher, I would lean guard, and I would probably – so edge rush, linebacker, guard, I think are my big three for them.
Yeah, I definitely like guard. I hear you with edge rusher, but I also wonder about interior defensive linemen for this team. I mean, like looking at their, sort of projected depth chart going into this year, you've got Nnamdi Madubuike at defensive tackle, and then next to him you have Travis Jones, which, isn't awful, but also I think that could be a spot that could be of good improvement just to really really shore up the run defense there. Obviously, their run defense was nowhere near as bad as some other teams, in the league, but still could be a need there. I agree with linebacker and maybe corner, maybe safety. I think just secondary in general, they could use some help with. I mean, I feel like the only surefire guy back there right now is Kyle Hamilton. I think Marlon Humphrey is still still good. But I'm not, I don't know. I'm just, I think that it could be corner. I think it could be safety. But something in the secondary for sure. I think that they also are kind of drafting in that, hey, this might be the spot to get Nick Emanwari or Malachi Starks. Or maybe that's where, a guy like a Maxwell Hairston out of Kentucky goes, is around there. But again, like we keep saying, this is not just first round, needs. This is throughout the whole draft. So, Yeah, moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals. I think we could do this one really quick in that their needs are edge, their needs are corner, and their needs are any other spot on the defense. I mean, like, they had just such a poor defense last year. Their offense looks really, really good. I feel like last year their offensive line actually looked better than most of the years since Joe Burrow has been in the league. Um, and we definitely saw that towards the in the back end of the season. They got T. Higgins and Jamar Chase signed and taken care of. So they're pretty good at wide receiver. Again, maybe tight end for them. Maybe they feel like they could upgrade at running back, but I feel like the obvious thing for this team is that defense is the place where things need to get better. Nick, what do you think?
I'm there with you. My thing is with this defense is that they've invested a lot in it and just haven't had a lot of payout, especially on the D line. They drafted Miles Murphy in the first round. Cam Sample, I believe, was in the second round. They drafted McKinley Jackson in the third round, I think, last year. Chris Jenkins in the second round. Joseph Osai, I think, in the third round. Like, they just drafted in the top 3 rounds a bunch of defensive line dudes, a bunch of tackles and edges. And I don't know that any of them have panned out, really. It feels like BJ Hill they got from the Giants. He's been steady. They miss DJ Reader a good amount. He played very, very well for the Lions when he wasn't injured. He's an incredible run stuffer, and without him, the Bengals were struggling a lot stopping the run. But, man, it feels like if Trey Hendrickson's not there, that it's a whole mess of highly drafted but poor play kind of defensive linemen. So I think you could definitely say, hey, just because you drafted these dudes highly, you don't expect them to be better. But I don't know what kind of risk reward you're looking at as far as drafting any of the D line, considering you've already invested so highly. It doesn't seem like you can hit on it. It feels like they've really struggled to hit there. Feels like linebacker, they're okay. Logan Wilson's been good. Jermaine Pratt's been good. I believe Wilson was injured pretty badly last year. Feels like corner's a massive need. Feels like Dax Hill, even though they didn't want to play him at safety and moved him to corner, he then got injured. A corner opposite Cam Taylor-Britt, and Cam Taylor-Britt struggled as the number 1 corner. He's had good plays in his career, but as the number 1 corner, he's definitely had some low-light kind of plays. I think definitely you're looking at D-line of all flavors, corner of some kind. And I think the easy offensive line for Joe Burrow, I'd probably lean offensive guard for them if you're going to lean that way. But that's kind of where I look at the Bengals right now. Pretty easy read, as you said.
Yep, totally agree. Not much more that needs to get said about them. Moving on to the Cleveland Browns, though, this one is interesting. And you and I were talking about this briefly before we got started. The Browns, they just need a lot. Is really what this comes down to. I think everyone feels like the obvious, sort of like, oh, well, it's the Browns would be quarterback. But I look at this roster and thinking about outside of just this next year, like, yes, the Browns are like, we need to make the playoffs this year, right? If Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski were told that, you need to make the playoffs this year to keep your jobs, then yes, quarterback has to be a top priority draft pick here. But I think if you're looking at like a 2-3 year plan, which, listen, if you're drafting number 2 overall, that's really where you're you're kind of in a 2 at best, 3 more likely year plan. I'm not sure that quarterback is really the top priority then, especially in a down quarterback draft class. So the way I look at it, they don't have a running back. Nick Chubb is a free agent. Now who knows? They might bring him back. They right now they're wide receivers. It's like, okay, they have Jerry Jeudy, and then they have lots of guys, but kind of similar to the way we were talking about the Patriots. It's like and the Bills as well. It's like they have guys that play wide receiver and are on their roster, but they don't have dudes that play wide receiver on their roster. And we know what I mean there with that difference. So I feel like that is a concern. It would be great if they had an edge opposite Myles Garrett. It would be great if they had a corner opposite Denzel Ward. So this is a team that I feel like if they went into the draft, like, listen, we are taking the best available with every draft pick. Like, we are putting our big board together, not without thinking about, what position it is and how valuable that position is, not thinking positional value, just who are the best football players in this draft and put it together. And whoever is at the top of that come the time that they draft, I think would be a really, really good spot for them. But Nick, what do you think are like some specific needs for them?
So I'm a little bit opposed to you here, Jack, where you said, like, well, considering this roster is kind of a disaster, I think they could just pick best player available. I don't view it as necessarily a disaster. I think that they kind of are able to move pieces around to be able to piecemeal a lot of this together. And I view this quarterback room specifically as being probably bottom 3 in the league, if not worse. Where I think that personally, like, say, for example, their quarterback room against the Steelers' quarterback room. The Steelers' quarterback room is barren, and people could consider it the worst quarterback room in the entire league. They have Mason Rudolph and Skylar Thompson. Those are the only quarterbacks who are signed to the Steelers right now. A quarterback room that nobody would like outside of, like, some Steelers fans that are a little weird in the head like yours truly. But anyway, you put up Deshaun Watson as he's been in Cleveland and Kenny Pickett as he's been in his NFL career. And I really think the Steelers, Mason Rudolph, I think could be better than both of them pretty easily this year, where I'm not a Mason Rudolph truther of he's a top 10 quarterback or like he's amazing or anything like that. That's not the case with him. But he outplayed and outperformed Kenny Pickett and looked better than him and won the job over him when Kenny Pickett got benched. And Deshaun Watson's been an abject disaster, major health concern, major off-the-field problem, where I think you could take almost any quarterback in the league and say, oh, yeah, I'd take them over Deshaun Watson, where I think their quarterback position in Cleveland is a 5-alarm fire of if you're trying to win this year, you've got no chance with these quarterbacks. But if you draft Shedeur Sanders, say, for example, at number 2, I don't see why they couldn't do the Joe Flacco run of make it to the playoffs kind of with a defensive-led team and that kind of roster and running game if you get a good running back in there. I just don't see how that's impossible for them, where their quarterback position, I think, is such an anchor right now, where I think that's just a disaster need situation. I understand why you feel like they have other needs. I brought up when we were talking earlier about defensive tackle, or at least wrote it down. They're depending heavily on 34-year-old Shelby Harris and on 30-year-old Malik Collins. And both of those dudes, if you're depending on 30-plus-year-old defensive tackles and basically no other starters at the position, they do have Mike Hall, who, as a rookie last year, was an injury concern and off-the-field concern. And that kind of worries me, I would say, where if you have your old dudes getting really old and deteriorating, or if you have your off-field concern guy being an off-field concern, that could easily become a, wait, we don't have NFL bodies there kind of position. So I think that's a big need. I think that Joel Bitonio retiring after this year creates a need there, but I think guard's one of those positions that you can piecemeal together where they have Tevin Jenkins on the roster, and he can play for a year if you needed him to. You could just plug him in if Bitonio retires and be like, okay, we'll figure it out. We'll do that. And so I really don't think there's any other 5-alarm fires that we've talked about before this Browns quarterback room. This is a disaster scenario that they might just be able to be like, well, we can just tank for another year and get another good draft pick and figure it out and just draft best player available. They could do that, but this is a disaster. And let's not gloss over, it's a disaster. So
yeah, no, I agree with you that it's a complete and utter disaster. And I think, yeah, I mean, I think again, like it comes down to like, okay, for Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry's job, what were they told, like, when they had their end of season, sort of exit meetings and interviews? Was it like, we need to see significant improvement next year? Or is it like, listen, we're not concerned, we trust you guys with whatever you need to do next year, and we'll go from there? Because if so, then I do like waiting to take a quarterback, because who knows? Because who knows, you might be in a position that you can draft well to have a good roster this year, and maybe get a guy like, I think we all kind of assume that Arch Manning is going to be the number one pick next year. But get a highly touted, highly rated quarterback that if you stacked him up against Shedeur Sanders, you're like, actually, this guy rates better, or maybe, like, you take a quarterback later, you take a Tyler Shuck, you take a Kyle McCord on day 2, and then you do get a quarterback without, I think the thing that, like drafting quarterbacks high is such a double-edged sword, because it's like we are putting so much capital, so much skin in the game for, we have to ride him. It doesn't matter. It does not matter how good or bad he is. Like, you have to be the guy throughout the rest of this contract, pretty much, unless it's like truly, truly disastrous, like a Josh Rosen, Zach Wilson type thing. But if the Browns were to not draft a quarterback in round 1, and say take Kyle McCord in round 3, then, or Tyler Shuck or Brady Cook, take some quarterback in round 3, then it's like, well, listen, if they're like, man, it's like, well, we drafted a 3rd round quarterback. What did we expect? Not every 3rd round quarterback is going to be Russell Wilson. In fact, most 3rd round quarterbacks are not Russell Wilson. And so I think that could be, I think if they're prioritizing quarterback, I think it would be better suited for them if they prioritize that on day 2 as opposed to day 1.
Sure, that's possible. Unless you love Shedeur. If you love Shedeur, I think you just do it if you're the Browns. If you love him. But if you like him with this roster, with the weight of the Deshaun Watson contract, I still think that you just draft him if you love him. If you like him, you can wait on it if you think this is just going to be a disaster all over again. But, yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, last here for the AFC North is the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Pittsburgh Steelers, again, I think the biggest thing that's kind of the asterisk when we look at them right now is I feel like a lot of us are pretty sure that they're going to end up with Aaron Rodgers as their starting quarterback week 1. It hasn't happened yet. It might not happen, especially with a guy like Aaron Rodgers. You just really never know. So we don't want to count those eggs before they've hatched. But we still, that's kind of where all signs are pointing. But the big thing for them is they got a wide receiver in DK Metcalf. They traded for him and then gave him a 5-year, $150 million deal. So Pittsburgh has their bona fide wide receiver, that dude that has been consistent enough and is scary enough that teams need to be careful, and definitely helps the production of George Pickens by there being another guy that defenses need to worry about. They signed Kenneth Gainwell to a 1-year deal. They lose Najee Harris. They signed Darius Slay to a 1-year deal. Nick, I'm just really gonna just turn this over to you and let you, because you know this better than I do, and that's for sure, about their offseason. So why don't you just take it away?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when I'm looking, I've specifically, obviously being a Steelers fan, I look at mocks and Steelers picks all the time. I look at them all the time because I love my Steelers. I want to know what I think they're going to do and how it's going to go and what they need. I think that they're definitely going to take a running back at some point in the draft. My guess would be in the 3rd or 4th round. I think that's a need, but it's probably not a first-round need. I think especially with the scarring of scarring's too strong of a word, but the way the Najee Harris whole contract went, I don't think it was a bad first round pick necessarily, but I think it's a first round pick that they probably just wouldn't make again because it was kind of just mediocre or okay. And the Steelers don't want to be in the business of making okay first round picks. First round value for a running back, the running back has to be so good to be drafted in the first round. Where when I see people say, oh, they need to draft Hampton from UNC, I'm like, no, they're not going to do that because they're not going to draft a running back around the 20s like Najee and just say, hey, we're going to invest in that way. So I really doubt that that's the direction they would go. I do think running back's a need, though, and they're going to draft a running back. I think it's going to be mid rounds, though, third or fourth. And I think that's going to be where the Steelers have a need, but it's a mid round need at that position. Mm-hmm. I think quarterback's obviously a need, where I think right now there are three potential paths forward. I think there's the path of Shedeur falls and you draft Shedeur. I think there's the path of Shedeur falls, you trade up for Shedeur. Those I kind of pair together. I think there's the path of Shedeur doesn't fall and you just rock with Aaron Rodgers and you draft a mid or late round quarterback like a Shuck, like a McCord. I think that that's definitely a path for them. I think that there could be a path where they just rock out with Aaron Rodgers and don't even draft a quarterback. I think they probably draft a mid or late one. But I think that there is a path where they just rock with Rudolph and Aaron Rodgers. I think there's even a path where they don't sign Rodgers. I think it's a smaller sliver, but I think you could do Rudolph and a second or third round dude. I think the people projecting Dart, I think that running back and quarterback at 20 are just something that the Steelers are a bit scarred over. Where I don't think they want to do the Kenny Pickett thing all over again unless it's Shedeur, who is clearly above Dart basically by everybody's accounts. And so I think that that's separate, but I don't think they'll go Dart at 21. I just don't think that's going to happen either. But I do think quarterback and running back are the largest offensive needs. The other just little shout out that I'll give with this Steelers team, they've invested really highly in offensive tackle, going offensive tackle first round the last 2 years. But Troy Fautanu out of Washington last year, he injured his knee very badly, dislocated his kneecap completely, had a season-ending knee injury last year. And I think that it maybe is on the table that they go offensive line in the first round. But specifically, the guy that I would look at would be Kelvin Banks out of Texas, where I think he's the pure offensive line character that kind of profiles as you could move him into guard, or you could have him be insurance for Fautanu at right tackle. I don't think they're going to do that either, but I think that you could do that, especially since Isaac Sumalo, you could kind of move pieces around since he's older if he retires after this year or falls off or moves on. So I think that if you're looking at the offense, it will be quarterback if Shedeur falls, running back in the mid rounds, and then maybe Banks, but probably not just because of line flexibility. When we look at the defense, this is kind of where I think that there are a couple more. This is where I think the likely first-round pick is going to be for the Steelers. I think that a Cam Hayward replacement, or generally speaking, a defensive tackle, I think that's a really high probability. There are a lot of people who think Harmon out of Oregon could be a good pick there. I think that will be a good pick. I think Grant, the nose tackle out of Michigan, makes a lot of sense. I think you plug in Grant at nose tackle and move Keanu Benton out to be the Cam Hayward replacement. And so I think that defensive tackle is a high probability first-round pick. I think that you could also look potentially at cornerback / slot guy, or I think Joey Porter is your number one corner. But I think Darius Slay being your number two corner on this roster is asking for disaster. When they rocked with, what's his name? The corner out of the Cardinals who should be a Hall of Famer potentially. My brain's saying Marcus Peters. Patrick Peterson. They rocked with Patrick Peterson for a year and change. And I think that that's kind of that kind of same thing where Slay is meant to be the Patrick Peterson replacement of old veteran cornerback, brings experience, kind of coaches up the dudes. And I think that Slay being a starting corner is just a disaster waiting to happen. And so I think they'll probably draft a corner at some point. I could see day 2 in the second or third round, Or I could see them going round one with Jahdae Barron out of Texas, where I think his size and speed profile as a slot really complements Joey Porter Jr. pretty darn well. And so I think that that is definitely a need at some level. Or I think that cornerback 2, defensive tackle for a Cam Hayward replacement, and then a running back in the mid rounds, and obviously quarterback. I think those are the 4 spots that I think I'm at right now.
Yeah, I think I like those a lot. Definitely like running back, and this is the perfect draft class to need to get a running back. It's a very deep running back draft class. I like defensive tackle a lot. Yeah, Cam Hayward is. I mean, he's Iron Man, but he is getting old. So at least someone that can be his running mate for the next year or two. Until he then retires and then can take over that position. And yeah, I like corner a lot for the Steelers as well. And then we'll sort of put in parentheses quarterback, because I feel like if they don't get Aaron Rodgers, then at some point in the draft they need to draft a quarterback, and it might be a guy that is just kind of a perennial backup for them. But at least just to have another guy there, that is playing quarterback for this team, and to learn the offense and be prepared if the time comes. So we have gone for just a little bit over an hour already, and we've talked about the AFC East and the AFC North. And so what we're going to do is we're going to stop here. Next week we'll do the AFC South and the AFC West, and actually, sort of doing the math, that actually will, if we do the NFC in 2 episodes as well, that'll lead us all the way up to the draft perfectly. So I think that's what we're going to do. But yeah, thank you all so much for listening, for watching. Let us know what you think. If we talked about your favorite team this week, let us know if you like our analysis, or if you're like, well, hey, you forgot about this, didn't think about this. Yeah, looking forward to talking the AFC South and the AFC West next week. Have a good one, y'all.